Without objection.
Madam President, I come to the floor today to talk about a grave threat to the United States of America, a grave threat to the world, and a grave threat to our friend and ally, the State of Israel. And that is the threat of Iran's nuclear weapons program. As we stand here today, pending on the floor has been legislation filed by Senator Richard Burr. In that legislation contains important sanctions that are essentially an insurance policy to make sure that Tehran does not play the United States of America, and in fact that they are serious about stopping their nuclear weapons program. Unfortunately, there is a history with Iran. It's a history where we talk, they enrich, and there is a long history of that. And that's why it is so important right now that we have this insurance policy. These sanctions that are pending on the floor would only go in place if Iran violates the interim agreement that has been entered into between the administration and other countries in the world and Iran, and if they fail to reach a final agreement that is acceptable to the security interests of the United States of America and to our allies in the region to make the world a safer place. Let me just say up front, we cannot accept a nuclear-capable Iran. In other words, an Iran that is capable of having a nuclear weapon. Why is that? Iran is a country that has threatened to wipe the state of Israel off the earth. Iran has called our country the Great Satan. Iran is the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism. They have supported terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. They have obviously worked, unfortunately, against our strong ally, Israel. They have supported the murderous Assad regime, being one of the chief supporters of Assad, providing arms to Assad so that he can murder his own people. There are so many examples, unfortunately, of the danger of Iran having nuclear weapons capability. And if Iran gets this capability, unfortunately, we will also find ourselves in a position where we are in a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, a Sunni Shia arms race that then will also threaten the world and make that region even more of a tinderbox. So where we find ourselves right now, we are at a critical moment. And I'm deeply worried that the sanctions regime that this Congress has worked so hard to put in place on a strong bipartisan basis is unraveling, and that we need an insurance policy to make sure that Iran knows that they are not going to play us and unravel these sanctions. And the way we can do that is by having sanctions legislation passed that is prospective. If Iran is serious about a nuclear weapons agreement that takes away their capability of having a nuclear weapon, then they should not have a problem with prospective sanctions by this Congress, because those sanctions would only go in place, again, if they violate the interim agreement. And if their words mean anything, then they shouldn't have a problem with the fact that we're just saying that if you violate it, we will impose additional sanctions. We will not allow this sanctions regime to unravel. And what is the significance of this sanctions regime? The work done by this Congress on a bipartisan basis and with other partners around the world is what has brought Iran to the table. All of us want a diplomatic resolution that stops Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But we need to go into this with clear eyes. And that's why having this insurance policy is so important. A final agreement with Iran will only be meaningful if it ensures that they will not have the ability to enrich, because their ability to enrich makes it easier for them to immediately ramp up to nuclear weapons capability. And I recently attended a security conference in Munich and met with some of the representatives of the Arab nations. And they were in fact asked in an open forum, if Iran is allowed under what agreement is reached to enrich, what will the rest of you want to do? And the answer was that we will want the right to enrich too. So this final agreement needs to stop Iran's ability to enrich, because if we do not, we still face not only the risks of Iran being able to quickly ramp up to a nuclear weapon and to its capability that can harm the world, but also the risk that the Arab nations themselves will all enrich. And so even if they don't have nuclear weapon capability, that they're all right at the point where they could break out to that capability, and that is just as dangerous for the world. So what we have pending on the floor makes clear that this agreement, if it is going to protect the United States of America, if it is going to protect our allies and protect the world, it has to be clear. It should prevent Iran from that enrichment capability. This agreement should stop their capability at the Iraq facility to produce plutonium. This agreement should absolutely make sure that we are given access to their military facilities so that we understand and we can stop them from their programs working on weaponization of nuclear materials. I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. The Director of National Intelligence and others have told us that Iran, by 2015, could have ICBM capability. Can you imagine if they were to continue with this nuclear program and continue it and also have ICBM capability? This is a true risk to the world. But an agreement is only meaningful if it is an agreement that we can rely on, that is open, that is transparent, that is verifiable, and that it absolutely stops them from having a nuclear program that could be a threat to the world. And that means things like stopping enrichment, stopping the Iraq plutonium reactor, and their weaponization program. We need full access. That needs to be open. And we should be addressing Iran's acts of terrorism throughout the world. Because one of the grave dangers that I worry about is that Iran itself, if it has a nuclear weapon, may not use it itself, but may pass it on to the terrorist groups that Iran is associated with. And that is a grave danger, not only to our ally Israel, but also to the United States of America. One of the reasons I believe that the sanctions legislation on the floor that's pending is so important, because some of the statements that have been made recently by the regime in Tehran are very troubling and really harken back to their prior behavior of we talk, they enrich, and question how serious they are about a verifiable, transparent, and real agreement to stop their nuclear weapons program. For example, on February 18th, in talks between Iran and the P5+1 that were held in Vienna, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the talks, quote, will not lead anywhere. And in advance of the talks, President Rouhani, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has described as a wolf in sheep's clothing, and I would agree with him on that, has stated that peaceful atomic research would be pursued forever. Iran's foreign minister recently clashed with the lead U.S. negotiator, Wendy Sherman, over the Iraq and Fordo facilities. Sherman stated that Iran had no need for either facility. And make no mistake, if Iran is serious about giving up its nuclear weapons capability, then, or their pursuit of that capability, then she is absolutely right. There is no need for the Iraq facility that allows them to produce plutonium. There is no need for these underground facilities like Fordo, trying to hide their program from the rest of the world. And the foreign minister of Iran, in reaction to her comments, described her statement as worthless and reinforced Iran's position that that is not negotiable, their ability to produce atomic energy, the plutonium reactor at Iraq. This is deeply, deeply troubling, and it is one of the reasons that we need to send a clear message now here. They came to the table because of sanctions. The sanctions were having a deteriorating effect on their economy. Yet, recently, we have seen that my fear is that the sanctions regime is unraveling, and they're actually using this negotiation with the administration to further unravel those sanctions to get what they want without an insurance policy that we will get what we want. And that's what this sanction legislation does. And one of the issues that has come up is, in February, a French trade delegation representing 116 French companies traveled to Tehran. Recently, I met with one of the Arab nations' foreign ministers, and he told me that the hotel rooms in Tehran are filled with businessmen and women looking to line up to do business with Tehran. This is a real issue that the sanctions regime is starting to unravel, and the legislation that we have that's pending on the floor with 59 co-sponsors is an insurance policy to say, if this agreement, and you are not serious about this agreement, we will impose further sanctions to make sure that we do everything we can to stop you from having nuclear weapons capability. This is a critical moment in the history of this country. This is a critical moment for the safety of the world. We want to stop Iran using diplomatic means from having nuclear weapons capability because of the risk it presents to the world. But we cannot be naive. We have to understand the prior behavior of Iran, because the prior behavior of Iran, that will allow us to go in with eyes wide open, rather than just taking their assurances that they are serious about a nuclear weapons agreement that will stop them from having this capability. So as we stand here on the floor today, I would ask the majority leader to allow a vote on this legislation, to allow us to send a clear message to Iran, to send a clear message to the rest of the world that they should not think that they should do further business with Iran unless Iran is serious about giving up its nuclear weapons program through a transparent, verifiable agreement that will ensure that they cannot threaten the state of Israel, that they cannot threaten the rest of the world with a nuclear weapon. So I would ask the majority leader to allow a vote on this important legislation. You know, there are so few pieces of legislation that come through the Senate that actually have 59 co-sponsors. This is one of them. It certainly has strong bipartisan support. And I don't buy the argument that if we were to pass this legislation, that somehow Iran would walk away from the negotiations. If Iran walks away from the negotiations because we've passed prospective legislation as an insurance policy to make sure that they are serious about a real, verifiable agreement that stops their nuclear weapons program, then frankly, we know that they have been playing us. Because the reality is, if they're serious, they shouldn't care if we've put an insurance policy out there, because if they're serious, they'll follow through, they'll do what the interim agreement requires, and they will agree to a final agreement that stops their nuclear weapons program in a transparent, verifiable way once and for all. On the other hand, if they're just going to walk away with the threat of prospective sanctions, how serious can they be? And we then will still have the sanctions regime in place that will continue to put pressure on them to say the United States of America and our allies, we will not accept a nuclear-armed Iran because of the threat it presents to us, because we cannot allow the largest state sponsor and most serious state sponsor of terrorism around the world to have this capability. We cannot allow a race in the Middle East between a Sunni-Shia race to see who can have a nuclear weapon first because of the danger it presents to the world. And finally, we cannot allow Iran to continue to threaten our friend and ally, the State of Israel. And I understand and appreciate that when Iran and its leaders have made statements that they want to annihilate Israel from the face of the earth, that our friends in Israel take that very serious. They have vowed never again. We stand with them, never again, not only for their friendship, but also for the safety of the world. And so today, we have pending on this floor an opportunity to make clear what the United States of America stands for, and that we will not accept a nuclear-armed Iran, and they must be serious, or there will be consequences in terms of economic sanctions. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.